Hello, juniors. I've already read to you one time today. You just didn't know it because GrannyDee evidently forgot to hit the record button. So, here we go. Snow White and Rose Red. Once upon a time, a poor widow lived in a lonely cottage. In a garden in front of the cottage grew 2 rose trees. Ever heard of rose trees? Rose bushes, I have. But anyway, one a white rose and the other red. She had 2 children who were like the rose trees. One was called Snow White and the other Rose Red. They were as poor and happy, as busy and cheerful as any 2 children in the world. Only Snow White was quieter than Rose Red. Rose Red liked better to run about in the meadows and fields, picking flowers and chasing butterflies. But Snow White sat at home with her mother and helped her with the housework or read to her when the work was finished. The 2 children were so fond of each other that they always held each other by the hand when they went out together. And when Snow White said, "We will not leave each other," Rose Red answered, "Never, as long as we live." And their mother would add, "What one has, she must share with the other." They often ran about the forest alone. And gathered red berries, and no wild animals did them any harm, but came to them trustfully. The little hare, rabbit, would eat a cabbage leaf out of their hands, and the doe grazed by their side. The stag leapt merrily by them, and the birds sat still upon the boughs and sang all the songs they knew. No harm ever came to them. If they stayed too late in the forest and night came on, they laid themselves down near one another upon the moss and slept until morning. Their mother knew this and never worried while they were away. Once, when they had spent the night in the woods and the dawn awakened them, they saw a beautiful child in a shining white garment standing near their bed of moss. He looked kindly at them but said nothing and went away into the forest. When they looked around, they had found they had been sleeping quite close to a precipice. Their mother told them then of the good angel who watches over children. The precipice, I believe, is like a edge, maybe of a cliff or something. So they were sleeping close to that, and that's why she said a good angel watched over them so they didn't roll off. Snow White and Rose Red kept their mother's cottage so neat that it was a pleasure to enter it. In the summer, Rose Red took care of the house and every morning laid a nosegay by her mother's bed. And a nosegay is like a little bouquet of flowers by their mother's bed before she woke, and in it was a rose from each tree, so a red one and a white one. In the winter, Snow White lit the fire and hung the kettle over it on the hook. Though the kettle was only of copper, it shone like gold. It was polished so brightly, and I love how shiny copper looks. In the evening, when the snowflakes fell, their mother said, "Go, Snow White, bolt the door." Then they sat around the hearth, and their mother read aloud out of a large book. And the 2 girls listened as they sat and spun. Close by them lay a lamb upon the floor, and behind them on a perch sat a white dove with its head tucked under its wing. One evening, as they sat cozily together, there was a knock at the door, as if someone wished to be let in. Their mother said, "Quick, Rose Red, open the door. It must be a traveler who is seeking shelter." I'd have been more careful than that. I said, "Who is it?" Rose Red unbolted the door, thinking that it was a poor man, but it was not. It was a huge bear that pushed his broad black head in the door. It would have scared me to death. Rose Red sprang back, the lamb bleated, and the dove fluttered, and Snow White hid herself behind her mother. But the bear began to speak, a talking bear. And it said this: "Do not be afraid. I will do you no harm. I'm very cold and only want to warm myself beside your fire." I'd have been a little suspicious of that, too. Poor bear, said their mother. Popcorn. Lie down by the fire, only take care that you do not burn your coat. Then she told Snow White and Rose Red to come forward, that the bear meant kindly and would not harm them. They both came forward, and by the lamb and the dove came nearer and ceased to be afraid of him. Here, children, said the bear, brush the snow out of my coat a little. The children brought the broom and swept the bear's fur clean. He then stretched himself by the fire and growled contentedly. It was not long before they were quite at home and began to play tricks with their clumsy guest. They tugged his fur with their hands, put their feet upon his back, and rolled him about. They took a hazel switch and beat him. It's not too nice. And when he growled, they laughed. The bear took it all in good part, meaning all in good fun. Only when they were too rough, he called out, "Children, leave me my life." When it was bedtime and the others went to bed, the mother said to the bear, "You may lie here by the hearth, and you will be quite safe from the cold and snow." As soon as it was morning, the two children let him out, and he trotted off across the snow into the forest. Henceforth, the bear came every evening, laid himself down by the hearth, and allowed the children to amuse themselves with him as much as they desired. They became so used to him that the door was never fastened until their black friend arrived. When spring had come and all outside was green, the bear said one morning to Snow White, "I must go away and cannot come back for the whole summer." "Where are you going, dear bear?" asked Snow White. The bear answered, "I must go into the forest and guard my treasure from the wicked dwarfs. In the winter, when the earth is frozen hard, they are obliged to stay below and cannot work their way through. But now, when the sun has thawed and warmed the earth, they break through it and come out to pry and steal. And what they once take into their caves is not easily recovered." Snow White was sorry to have him go away. As she bolted the door for him, his fur coat caught in the bolt, and a piece of it was torn off. It seemed to Snow White as if she had seen gold shining through it, but she was not certain. The bear ran quickly away and was soon out of sight among the trees. A short time afterwards, the mother sent the children into the forest to get firewood. They came to a big tree which had fallen to the ground. Close by the trunk, something was jumping backwards and forwards in the grass. They couldn't make out what it was. When they drew closer, they found it was a dwarf with an old, wise, and withered face, and a snow-white beard 1 yard long, and the end of his beard was caught in a crack in the tree, and the little fellow was jumping up and down, not knowing what to do. He glared at the children with his fiery red eyes and cried, "Why do you stand there? Can you not come here and help me?" "Why, little man, what are you about there?" asked Rose Red. "You stupid prying goose," answered the dwarf. He's not nice at all, is he? "I was going to split the tree, of course, to get a little wood to cook with. The little bit of food one of us wants gets burnt up directly with thick logs. We do not eat as much as you greedy folks do. I had just driven the wedge safely in, and everything was going as I wished, when suddenly out jumped the wedge, and the tree closed so quickly that I could not pull out my beautiful white beard. So now it's caught, and you laugh. How odious you are." The children tried very hard, but they could not pull the beard out. It was caught too fast. "I will run and fetch someone," said Rose Red. "You senseless girl," snarled the dwarf. "Why should you fetch someone? You are already too many for me. Can you not think of something better?" "Don't be impatient," said Snow White. She pulled her scissors out of her pocket and cut off the end of his beard. As soon as the dwarf felt himself free, he laid hold of a bag of gold which lay among the roots of the tree and lifted it up, grumbling to himself, "Clumsy people. cutting off a piece of my fine beard. Bad luck to you." Then he swung the bag upon his back, and off he went without even once looking at the children. Don't you think he should have said thank you? Sometime after, Snow White and Rose Red went to catch a dish of fish. As they came near the brook, they saw something that looked like a large grasshopper jumping toward the water as if it was going to leap in. They ran up and found it was the dwarf. Where are you going?" said Rose Red. "You surely don't want to jump into the water." "I'm not so foolish," cried the dwarf. "Don't you see that wretched fish wants to pull me in?" The little man had been sitting there fishing when unluckily the cord twisted his beard in the fishing line at the very moment that the big fish took the bait. The little dwarf had not strength enough to pull it out, and the fish had the better of it and was pulling the dwarf near the edge. He held on to all the reeds and rushes, but it was little good. He was forced to follow the movements of the fish and was in urgent danger of being dragged into the water. The girls came just in time. They held him fast and tried to free his beard from the line, but all was in vain. Beard and line were tangled fast. Nothing was left but to bring out the scissors and cut the beard, whereby a little bit of it was lost. When the dwarf saw this, he screamed out, "Do you call that civil, you thoughtless girl, disfiguring one's face like this? Was it not enough to clip off the end of my beard? Now you have to cut off the best part of it. I cannot let myself be seen by people. I wish you had been made to run the soles off your feet." Then he took a sack of pearls which lay in the rushes, and without saying a word more, he dragged it away and disappeared behind a stone. He is so ungrateful. It happened that soon afterwards the mother sent the two children to the town to buy needles and thread and laces and ribbons. The road led them across a heath upon which large rocks lay strewn here and there. Soon they noticed a bird hovering in the air, flying slowly round and round them. It sank lower and lower, and at last settled near a rock not far off. Directly afterward they heard a loud cry of terror. Running up, they saw to their great alarm that the eagle had seized their old friend, the dwarf, and was carrying him off. The children, full of pity, caught tight hold of the little man and pulled so hard that the eagle at last let the dwarf go. As soon as the dwarf recovered from his fright, he cried in a shrill voice. Do you think he's going to say something nice or mean? Is he going to be grateful or not? "Could you not have done it more carefully? You drag so hard at my coat that it's all torn and full of holes, you helpless, clumsy creatures." Then he took up a sack of precious stones. First he had gold, then pearls, now precious stones, and slipped away again under the rock into his hole. The children, who by this time were used to his ungratefulness, went on their own way and did their errand in the town. On the way home, they again crossed the heath and surprised the dwarf, who had emptied out his bag of precious stones on the ground. The evening sun shone upon the brilliant stones. They glittered and sparkled with all the colors so beautifully that the children stood perfectly still and gazed upon them. "Why you stand there gaping?" cried the dwarf, his ashen face becoming copper red with rage. Suddenly a loud growl was heard, and a black bear came trotting towards them out of the forest. The dwarf sprang up in fright, but he could not get to his cave, for the bear was already upon him. Then, in the dread of his heart, he cried, "Dear Mr. Bear, spare me. I will give you all of my treasures. Look, the beautiful jewels lying there. grant me my life. What do you want with a little fellow like me? Come, take these 2 wicked girls, for mercy's sake, eat them." The bear had no heed of his words, but gave him one blow with his paw, and he did not move again. The girls had run away, but the bear called to them, "Snow White and Rose Red, do not be afraid. Wait, I will come with you." Then they knew his voice and waited. When he came up to them, suddenly his bear skin fell off, and he stood there, a handsome prince, clothed all in gold. Remember the fur when he was a bear that got caught in the door, and they said it looked like it had gold in it? "I'm a king's son," he said. "I was bewitched by that wicked dwarf who had stolen my treasures. I had to run about the forest as a bear until I was freed by his death. Snow White was married to the prince, and Rose Red to his brother. They divided between them the great treasure which the dwarf had gathered together in his cave. Their mother lived peacefully and happily with her children for many years. She took the 2 rose trees with her children, and they stood before her window, and every year bore beautiful roses, white and red." The end. And I'll be back sometime tonight, I hope, if not first thing in the morning, to read the next story called Billy Beg and His Bull. And that will be the last story. And I know I told you that I was going to read this book, but I totally didn't look. I was thinking this was the first book in the series, but I think it was Miss Linda Jean told me that it was not the first book in the series. And look right here in the front. It tells the books, I do believe, in order. So Little House in the Big Woods will be the first one we read. So I'll take this one back tomorrow. And then Farmer Boy. And then this one. So this is actually the 3rd book in the series. And the other books are On the Banks of Plum Creek, By the Shores of Silver Lake, The Long Winter, Little Town on the Prairie, These Happy Golden Years, and The First 4 Years. So I don't know that we'll read all of those, but we'll read hopefully at least the first 3 anyway. And then if you like them, you can read them yourself. Okay? So GrannyDee will be back, like I said, either later tonight or first thing in the morning, or sometime tomorrow. I say first thing in the morning, but if I renew the books, we don't have to be in a hurry. But I would like to go back to the library and get the other book, because we will be finished shortly. Okay, love you all. Have a blessed night and a great day tomorrow until I see you again. Well, I'll see you again tonight probably. But be sweet and don't be ugly. Mwah.